Hello, everyone. It is your host of the Sales Dev Squad podcast. My name is Mateo Elvira. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We have a special guest for you today. We have University of Arizona alumni, both SDR in SoCal and NorCal. We have Emily Haines, the SDR manager over at Handshake. Thank you so much for joining us, Emily.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Emily, thanks so much for hopping on. Really just kind of want to get into it. Did a little bit of research on your background as far as, how you kind of got into sales development. So I guess for starters, do you mind telling us a little bit about kind of how you got into sales dev and what you guys are doing over at Handshake?
Yeah, of course. So I'll start with, I guess, my background and how I got into sales development. Um, a couple weeks after I graduated college, I started working at a startup at the time called House. I was employee number 79 and I think number 6 on what we called the account coordinator team. The role of an account coordinator is exactly what an SDR is doing. So it was kind of before the SDR buzzword came about. So yeah, I started cold calling and I, at the time, kind of thought I couldn't necessarily see it as a long-term career, but the more I applied myself and more I kind of viewed it as a challenge and kind of a stepping stone in my career, the more enjoyment I got out of it. I think it was really fun and I could see myself building a career there. So moved into the account executive role shortly after. I piloted that transition at the company at the time. And then was able to work my way up to finally work with sales development representatives, manage that team, and help grow and scale it in the Southern California office, which was very exciting. And that's when I found my passion for sales development. I'm currently at Handshake. I've only been there for about 2 months, but so far I've been, welcomed by such a great community, a really mission-driven company that's helping to democratize opportunity for students nationwide. And it's really cool to be able to kind of put that mission into practice when it comes to hiring and make sure that we're getting a really great group of, diverse thought and background.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that overview. Really appreciate it. I guess for our audience here, Emily, do you mind just telling us a little bit about like what Handshake is and what you guys do over there?
Yeah, of course. I would imagine that many people that are fresh out of college have some experience using Handshake. So essentially, what Handshake does is it is the system of record for many colleges. If you start at a school today, your career center might ask you to sign up for a Handshake account. And then we're partnered with tons of employers that allow recent college grads and college students to find their next internship or job.
That's awesome. Okay, yeah, I actually remember using Handshake when I was a student at Cal State Northridge. So it was really cool to see that you're obviously helping them out and they have a pretty large enough team to where they need an SDR manager.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's currently an SDR team of 6. We have a 7th starting a little bit later in August. So yeah, it's a rapidly growing team and it's exciting to be a part of it at this stage.
That's awesome. And I guess I'm just kind of curious, Emily, like I'm looking on your LinkedIn right now. You obviously were in like marketing and then you did a little bit of like campus rep work for Spotify and also did like some social media work. I'm kind of curious, like, how did you kind of navigate your way to sales development? I feel like you sort of had like an interest in marketing and social media. Like, what kind of led you to take the jump from like that to like sales?
Yeah. So, I mean, I did those things simultaneously while I was doing a full-time sales career. But always had interest in, I am sometimes like to be a creative person. So kind of trying to find ways to be creative in the office. And, one of my best friends and I were just talking about how personally, it's really exciting for me to be able to use my creativity as an SDR manager. So finding really creative and fun ways to keep people motivated. As we all know, the SDR role can sometimes be quite challenging. There are days where I'm sure it gets monotonous or days where you're just being like pummeled with rejection. So that's where I kind of found my creative outlet, is to be able to help motivate people, help keep them engaged, and building the foundation of their career.
That's awesome. Great stuff there. And I guess like on the topic, do you mind sharing with us a little bit more about, I guess, some of the creative ways that you kind of help bring your team up when they're perhaps feeling low?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I love to connect with other SDR managers, see what they're doing. I think fundamentally it starts with creating really strong relationships with SDRs, and with the people on my team. I really try hard to make sure that I'm not necessarily seen as a manager, but I'm seen as part of the team. And I think laying that foundation makes it fun and easy to work together. Um, I love having creative contests and spiffs. I think like everyone loves money and everyone loves, an extra gift card or dinner here and there. Um, I did one contest that I like, it was probably the most fun week, or I think it lasted 2 weeks, where I split the group up into teams. And obviously, things like appointment setting and number of appointments that actually held, those were taken into account. But then on top of that, I had some fun physical challenges. So plank contests, speed walking contest.
That's
Um,
awesome. I
had a,
love that.
we had a kitchen full of, those little oranges, the cuties, where we did a cutie eating contest that made quite a mess that our office team wasn't too thrilled with. But fun things to get us outside of the comfort zone. I think it's so important. So many times, you're cold calling for the first time and it is uncomfortable. So finding ways outside of the phone to push you outside of your comfort zone, I think can make it fun. And then of course, if there's contest money up for grabs as well, I think people enjoy that.
Nice. So it seems like you really try to diversify the types of ways you just like to keep people happy outside of like metrics and calls and dials and such.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Appreciate that. Um, but yeah, Emily, I'm looking at your LinkedIn right now, and what I found really curious was you kind of made a jump into sales management, and then you obviously made the return back to sales management. Is there any particular reason why you didn't want to like seek out like a closing role, like an account executive role that is like, I'm just curious, like, why did you return back to like a sales management role?
Yeah. I think that for the most part, like I am most fulfilled by helping other people in closing roles or get to closing roles. I mean, I was closing for a little over a year and it was exciting, it was fun, but I felt like an individual. And I think it's a lot more fun for me to lead a group of people and help people win together. So it's not like I didn't enjoy it or didn't want to pursue it, but I know now that I have been leading sales development teams for the past few years, that's where I get the most fulfillment out of my career and where I see my career heading.
Hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it seems like just from like the kind of ways that you told me how you're just kind of keeping it lively and fun in the office, I would be very blessed and happy to have you as my manager for sure.
Thanks. I also should mention that it's not all fun and games. I certainly expect a lot of my team. Um, and I think that's another thing is like building a foundation of a great relationship to the point where I'm able to say to people on my team, like, I'm going to push you pretty hard. And there are going to be days that you leave thinking, I don't really like working for her. But I'm okay with that because if that pushes somebody to be a better version of themselves and then pushes them in their career, then I think I've done my job.
Absolutely. Um, and I guess Emily, obviously, like you understand the SDR job very well. You did it. Um, I'm just kind of curious, like, are there any things that you learned as an SDR that you now incorporate to help like any of your current reps that might have not been as easily accessible or you kind of wish you had when you were an SDR?
Certainly, yeah. I actually did a little bit of self-reflection maybe 2 or 3 years ago of things that I wish I knew or I wish someone had told me. Um, one of them being like, it is okay to fail. Um, Everybody should have a month where they don't reach their quota. Of course, you should try your hardest, but going through that, I think it's important to remember that like failing is not, it's not a bad thing. You can learn a lot from it, and as long as you take it, reflect on it, and understand how you're going to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I wish someone had told me not to beat myself up over that. I also wish, looking back, um, I shared some information with you about my struggles to, did I want to be in sales? Was this the career for me? I think that is one of the wonderful things about an SDR program in general, is that this is your time to figure out what you want from your career, and really kind of hone your skills, because the skills you learn in an SDR role are useful anywhere you go after that. Even if you decide not to go into an AE role or a closing role, I think I wish someone had said to me, like, pay attention to what you're learning here. You will use it again. Um, and I wish I had worked a little bit harder. I always look back and just think, like, there were days where, I was maybe having too much fun in the office or getting distracted or distracting other people. Sometimes I wish someone had just sat me down and said, like, get to work, put your butt in the seat, pick up the phone, get to work.
That's great. I guess on that topic, like, I mean, I've been in SDR, and I guess what I found to be like the most challenging is to kind of get yourself started or make that first call or that first step. Um, what do you typically tell your reps that are kind of in the same boat, or like some fun ways to kind of get them going for the day? I mean, at least for me, like the hardest part is making that first dial or just kind of get the gears moving.
Totally. I think one thing that I always tried to remind myself, and I try to remind the reps as well, is like, most of us don't enjoy hearing our alarm in the morning and getting up. It's not always super fun. I mean, of course, there are some people that love, they're super early risers and they go work out. But what I always say is, like, you didn't wake up to that alarm to come in here and chat about the Bachelorette finale last night. You got up here, you got up, you got in here for a reason. Like, you're coming here every single day for a reason. Nobody's forcing you to come to this job. So you need to figure out why you're here and then think about that every single day when you get here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Um, and like, I'm also curious here, Emily, like I can just sense your passion like through here. Like you really enjoy helping people. You really love like mentoring people, and obviously you've done the job, so you know what it takes and you know what comes with being an SDR, the highs and the lows. What do you enjoy the most about being a manager, being a person that has that influence, and someone that a lot of SDRs really look up to for guidance and just like as a role model?
Sure. Gosh, I mean, one of the most rewarding things in the world, I think, or in my career so far at least, is when one of my representatives gets promoted, and then seeing them close their first deal. I think knowing that I was able to have some small part of that is, I feel really grateful for that. Um, and then there are little wins throughout the day. So just to give you an example, today's the last day of the month. I have a rep on my team who is just outstanding, like truly, truly talented, gifted on the phone. He had a rough month last month. We did a lot of strategizing together at the start. And today we looked at his number. He is over 144% to goal today.
Oh, wow.
And we sat down and he just had a moment where he was like, this is what I needed. Like, I needed a month ago, I needed to re-strategize. I needed some time. And so again, like, I don't think that he hit 144% because of me, but being able to share that moment with him and look back to a month ago, how he felt about his numbers last month, it's exciting for me.
Yeah, of course. Wow, 140% of quota the last day of July. That's amazing.
I know, crazy.
That's really great stuff. But yeah, Emily, I mean, I'm really just kind of curious, like for me in particular, what I really value when I was in SDR is, having resources available to obviously do the best job that I possibly can, but also continue to like develop and grow my craft. I'm just kind of curious, like, do you mind like sharing a couple ways that you kind of help your SDRs like get better, or like some resources that you kind of point them out to, or maybe like what you did as an SDR to just get better?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple things that you can do. Typically, the people that do the best are the ones that are incredibly resourceful. Um, I mean, so much so that like you almost get annoying to some of the AEs because you're asking them so many questions or asking, I think it can be summed up into somebody that is seeking development. Um, so many times and so often, because you're carrying a quota, you get caught up in the day to day of like just getting on the phone and hoping something works. But fundamentally, it's so important to work on like the building blocks that will get you to a place where you're hitting quota because you're naturally good at it. Some of the resources, I mean, I think LinkedIn Learning has some really, really great resources. I think those are really great when you've got to get ramped up pretty quickly. There are books out there that I love.
Do you have any that you recommend, or like just some favorites of yours?
Yeah. Never Split the Difference is a great book. I think it's a must read for everybody. Um, there's a book that actually has almost nothing to do with sales, but I encourage every single person on my team to read it. There are two representatives on my team right now reading it, and it's really fun to chat about. It's called The Defining Decade, and it's about, like I've said so many times, this part of your life is really when you build the foundation for a long and successful career. So it's important to really hunker down, focus, and make sure that you are, building those blocks and not just focused on the day to day. I think for me and for so many representatives that I've worked with, time management is like the hardest skill to teach. It's the hardest skill to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you can feel like you have so many resources and so much to do and you don't know how to get there. There's a book out there called 15 Secrets Successful People Know About Time Management. Um, that was almost like my Bible. It really helped me get organized. There's something in there called your MIT, your most important task. So every day when I get to the office, I make a list of typically about 3 most important tasks of the day. And what it does is in the corner of my eye. So if I'm doing something and I recognize that it doesn't support one of my 3 most important tasks of the day, I move on to something that does.
That's great stuff. Really appreciate that.
Sure.
And I guess on the flip side of that, Emily, like that's some really great feedback and some recommendations on how like SDRs can just get better and more knowledgeable about, their craft, so to speak. Would love to learn a little bit more about, what steps you take on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to just become a better manager and kind of perfect your craft.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things and I think I mentioned this, but one of the things that's so important to me is to be seen as a member of the team and not as a manager. So I do quite a bit too. I attend a lot of webinars that are geared toward SDRs. I attended a John Barrows training 2 weeks ago. I really want to make sure that I'm staying up to date and current with industry trends of what outreach is working and what cadences are working. That way, I'm not just saying, I'm not just speaking from my experience and what worked for me. That might not work anymore. So it's really important for me as a leader of the team to make sure that I understand what other SDR teams are doing, what's working for them, and how we can implement it. I do like to read a lot. I like to listen to podcasts. I often seek out advice from mentors and other people leaders, and make sure that I'm getting advice that I would follow and that would benefit my team.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
And was just curious as well, like when you kind of stepped into your first like management role or sales management role, do you mind sharing with us like some of the challenges or maybe some of the things that was really hard for you to kind of grasp, or would love to just kind of hear like, some of the challenges that you faced as you progressed into like a sales management role.
Yeah. I look back at my first, like the first group that I managed, and I wish I could reach out to each one of them and apologize.
um,
Um, Only because I think I made a mistake, a fundamental mistake that a lot of managers probably make, and that was to kind of try and define a management style. Um, Being a younger manager than what we typically see in the industry, and being a female, I really felt like I had to kind of come in with an iron fist and set my expectations from day one, and I forgot about the human element of it. Um, so looking back, I really regret that. And what I learned from it, and I learned from many leaders, and I was lucky enough to have really, really fantastic role models around me. What I learned from them is that it's really important to not have one management style. It's not a one size fits all, but to work with people individually, get to know them one on one, and then manage each person as if they were their own team. Because we all learn differently, we all accept feedback differently. So I really have tried since then to adapt my style to the person that I'm working with.
that's phenomenal. I love that. I love how you just tailor your efforts just like a prospect, right? If you're an SDR.
It's not that it honestly is not that different to selling. Yeah, tailor to each person that you're speaking to. Ask a lot of questions, open-ended questions, get to know them, and then you can figure out how you can help them.
That's great. I'm just curious, like what do you do to try to just get a better sense of like what your SDRs like, how they like to be rewarded, or just understand like who they are, just so you can get the most out of them, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's important to get people out of the office, to recognize like I'm a real person too, and I just want to get to know you. So try to do a team dinner every now and again. Um, I recently, and one of my friends had a manager that took them to get ice cream, so I copied that idea. We're lucky enough in San Francisco to have a Ghirardelli here, so took my team out for ice cream one day. Asked them questions about their experience as SDRs, because I think so many times I remember being an SDR and I remember complaining about things and thinking like this just is the way it is the way it is. But I think people don't understand that if you're vocal about things that are frustrating you, or that, ways that you think your job could be better, like your manager probably wants to help. They just don't know what they are. So getting people out of the office and making sure they're comfortable enough to share those things with me is really important to me. Um, I also make sure that my first one-on-one with everybody when they start on my team is not at all focused on work. I want to know where you grew up. I want to know what you like to do for fun. I have a terrible memory, so I write these things down and revisit them later. But it's important to me to get to know, what motivates somebody. Do they want to buy a ring for their boyfriend or their girlfriend, in 6 months, or are they wanting to buy a home one day? That way I can keep those things in mind when they're having a tough time, and make sure that they remember why they're here every day and why they're working so hard.
I love that. Do you typically have weekly one-on-ones with your reps, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I have a team of, like I said, 6 right now, um, with a 7th starting later in the month.
Nice, congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm able to have weekly one-on-ones, and then I also have weekly office hours, which means this is the time that I'll be at my desk and available for any questions or anything at all that you want to share with me. And then, of course, I have an open door policy. So my number one golden rule for my teams has always been be accountable to your needs, um, which means, if you need something and you really, really need my time or attention or to have a meeting, let me know that, and I'm happy to drop anything to work with you.
I love that. So your office hours, so to speak, is that specific to like your reps or anyone on the sales floor? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I as of right now, I do it just for my reps.
Okay.
Also, though, I think I've gotten to a place. I mean, I've only been at the company. I'm officially at 2 months now, so I think I do want to open it up to everybody else. I love getting feedback from AEs because I think they are. I mean, they're such great mentors, and it's so important to have a great relationship with, cross-functionally between the SDRs and the AEs. And if I can help facilitate that, that's important to me.
Yeah, and I guess on that, just kind of curious, like what I guess you in particular or anyone else at Handshake kind of does to just strengthen the bond and communication between SDRs to AEs. I feel like it's common to have a disconnect, but I'm just kind of curious, like if you kind of let your SDRs kind of keep an open communication with AEs, or I'm just kind of curious, like what steps you guys take to kind of just strengthen that bond.
Sure. So I will say that one of the most surprising things when I started at Handshake was how strong the bonds are between the SDRs and the AEs. I'm blown away by it every day. Each time an AE closes something that an SDR worked on, they are so quick to shout out their SDR and make sure that they're getting, some of the credit as well. So I honestly feel like I haven't had to do much. Um,
Great.
yeah, it is. I feel very lucky. But I think it's important to facilitate, if the AE needs a budget to take their SDR out for a dinner or for a drink to celebrate those things. Again, I think getting out of the office together is important. Um, at my past company at House, we did a lot to celebrate the small wins between SDRs and AEs. So sometimes the AEs would, run over and give their SDR a high five, like that. Those little things I think are so important and show SDRs that their work is appreciated, even though a lot of times it can go unnoticed.
Absolutely. I love that. And one question that I always like to ask SDR managers is regarding career pathing.
Mhm.
Was just curious, like, how do you typically like have that conversation or really get to understand where your reps want to go after the SDR role? Do they want to stay in the sales role? Do they want to move to a different department within the company, or is it even outside of the company? I'm just kind of curious, like, how you typically have those conversations with your reps.
Sure. Yeah, it's an important thing to talk about. Um, I was very vocal about it when I was an SDR when I started out. And you asked me earlier if there was anything I could tell myself as an SDR, what would it be? Looking back, I was only an SDR for 6 months. And I wish someone had made me stay there longer. I think I could have used more time client facing and making some more mistakes before having a big revenue goal. Um, so that's one thing I share with my SDRs. I tell them to be patient and to work hard. And even if you feel like you're ready for it, give yourself some extra time in the SDR role. Um, it's the one thing looking back that I really wish that I had stayed in SDR longer. And I think I could have built some more skills. And then when I did move to AE, I think I could have made a lot more money. Um, so I talk about that openly and often. Um, when it comes to having the conversations of where someone wants to go after the SDR role, I like to help facilitate the like thinking about that because you don't often. I mean, I know everyone thinks I want to move to the next position, but are you really thinking about how much you want it or why you want it? So I think it's important to ask questions like, what about the SDR role do you love? And what about it do you not like? And if somebody says like, oh, I don't like getting hung up on, I'm probably going to make them think like, that's not going to change when you're an AE. So is it something that you still want to pursue as a career or do you want to think about it a little bit more? So make sure that I'm facilitating maybe some of those questions that you probably don't think about all the time.
I see. So really just trying to see like what they love about the SDR role, excuse me, and then seeing like based off of those interests and desires, like where that could be a good fit.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's not up to me to say somebody belongs here or belongs there.
Sure.
but I do think it is a responsibility of mine to ask those questions and get them thinking about their career. um, and if they do have a slight interest in marketing or an interest in recruiting or whatever it might be, I think it's my responsibility to set up shadows or set up a coffee with somebody on one of those teams. I think it would be, whenever I'm interviewing people, I always say, like, it's my nightmare for someone to start a job and then think like, oh no, what did I get myself into? So facilitating the conversations for them to be able to understand what the role actually is and really decide, like, could I see myself doing that?
Yeah, I love that. And I guess like since you mentioned like interviews, I'm sure you're in tons of those or pretty frequently. Um, are there any certain characteristics or things that stand out to you in an SDR applicant that like in your head you're like, we need to hire this person, or this person would be a really good fit, or this person has skills that would translate very well in an SDR role, so to speak?
Yeah, of course. There are a couple things that I look for. At my current company at Handshake, it's really important to us that we have people that are really aligned with our mission of democratizing opportunity for students. So that's something that, if someone tells me that they don't resonate with our mission, they probably wouldn't enjoy working at Handshake. So it's important that they resonate with the overall goal of the company. Um, a couple of the things that I think make a candidate stand out in an SDR interview is if you can sense the passion and you can sense drive and I guess hunger for growth. Those are the really important things. Um, Personally, I'm not ever looking for somebody that has the perfect, the perfect elevator pitch or a perfect mock call or somebody that has experience. That isn't important to me. I think what's important to me is somebody that really wants development and really wants to grow. Typically, somebody that you can tell did quite a bit of preparation for the interview shows me that they're very interested. Somebody with really, really thoughtful questions. Not questions like, what's the company culture like, or what are the hours like? Think about where you see yourself growing in the career and asking thoughtful questions. I think those are the kind of people that stand out in interviews.
That's super helpful. Really appreciate that. Um, but yeah, I think we're coming to our last question here, Emily. I always like to ask this towards the end. For anyone that's listening to this podcast right now that is perhaps considering a role as a sales development rep, maybe they've had prior sales experience, or maybe they're coming from a totally different industry, what advice do you have for them, to if they're considering the jump, so to speak?
Totally. I think being an SDR is, without a doubt, to me, it's more challenging than closing. It is a difficult job and you've got to have thick skin. But if you're the type of person that wants to build a really, really solid career and you are willing to put in the extra hours and put in the extra effort and get uncomfortable, it's such a fun job and it's so incredibly rewarding. Um, so even if you have tough days and you think like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? Should I start looking for other jobs? Like, stick it out and push yourself because it's so worth it and it really can build skills that are useful anywhere.
Absolutely. Love that, Emily. Um, and I guess if anyone listening here is interested in contacting you specifically, or interested in learning more about the career opportunities at Handshake, where can they reach you?
Yeah, so reach out to me on LinkedIn, Emily Haines, Haines, kind of like the underwear, but with an I. And you can also email my personal email. It's hainesemilyann@gmail.com.
Great. And I assume Handshake career opportunities are on the website?
Yes, so you can go to joinhandshake.com/careers. And we are currently hiring for SDR roles and many other roles too.
Awesome. And you guys are specifically based out of the San Francisco area?
Yep, we are currently located in San Francisco, right in FIDI. We've got such a beautiful office. It's a really, really fun place to work.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Emily. Thank you to everyone who checked out another episode of the Sales Dev Squad. Some really great info here from the SDR manager over at Handshake, Emily Haines. Emily, thanks so much for hopping on today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mateo. I've enjoyed this.
Absolutely. So we would love to have you again in the future. But if anyone listening here, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. We are on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Spotify. We will catch you guys on the next one.